And I remember
Absolutely.
we were in this coffee shop and Michael was like, you guys are going to be jet lagged. Like, do you want to do it? And I was like, hell yeah. Like, I love trainers, like sneakers. We have to do this. And that was the energy that we were all like running on. Like, we were just like going from like company to company, and the next one, HSBC, and then Twitter wanted us to go and run sprints for them as well. And it was just like mind blowing. It's like, yeah, like we've got to do this. And then I'm thinking to myself, what a weird time to start an agency just as the world is going into this thing that no one really knows like what it is and how long it's going to last. And like even now, like to this day, like that's a disruptive process that these kind of Silicon Valley companies were like, we're going to get left behind if we don't do this. There's a few magic ingredients. I probably can't disclose too much. And actually for me, it was like, this is actually how, trade secrets coming out now, I am able to work my magic because so I will try and pick back up at
Yeah, yeah.
Qualcomm. So yeah, that small agency got acquired by Qualcomm, and they are a chipset manufacturer. For anyone who knows, they make the iPad chipsets and things like that. So many other things. And it was that time when we sat at our desks and we had like literally rebranded, got bought out by somebody, and we sat at the same desk, and yet suddenly we were being flown to San Diego in Virgin Upper, and we were treated like rock stars for like what we were doing with mobiles and things like that. It was a great time. I have very fond memories of being at Qualcomm, and we stayed for the team stayed for like 5 years. I ended up actually managing that team and actually art directing the global team of designers, and it was a great time. And but at that point, in the kind of like we were just about to hit 2010. I think it was the autumn of 2009. There was a recession going on as well, and I had already given my boss like a couple of years notice that I wanted to leave and we were going to relocate to the south of France. And that happened. And it was like originally he was like, well, we'll just kind of, we'll move you. And, if you report to me from Cambridge to San Diego, then I don't see why you couldn't work in the south of France, and, everything can work. And it was that time when, during that recession, I think a lot of developers got laid off, and I had the HR come to me and they were like, yeah, Rob, we can't support you moving to the south of France. And I was like, it's fine. That was what I originally wanted anyway. And I felt like I just needed to kind of like start on my journey of like creativity and design for myself. And, it would have been nice to have had that comfort blanket. Don't get me wrong, but equally, I was kind of grateful that my journey was actually going to start as I originally wanted it to. So yeah, back in, I think it was like November time, my wife, our 4 kids and our dog, we like packed up our VW camper van and we like crammed as much stuff in it as we could, and we sold the house and then moved to the south of France. And I think before I'd even left and resigned like Qualcomm, I had people going, "Hey Rob, can you do me an icon? We're starting a business. Can you do me a logo? Can you look at this UI?" And I had like so many kind of requests coming in. I just thought, wow, this is great, right? This is my journey, and I was really happy that this was now this
Best.
my future. My wife was like, she's like, any chance you don't have to design that logo and I'm packing the house up all by myself? Can you help me? And it's like some of these things are so urgent, they were needed to be done before I even like resigned. So, but it just meant that when I moved to the south of France, I had like loads of projects to kind of pursue. And also back then I'd given myself a personal goal of like I want to either learn like 3D or I want to start learning like to code. And Maya in the end won through, and I ended up starting some product design learnings for myself that I ended up actually translating into one of my freelance projects as well. And so France was great. I'd kind of like we would immerse ourselves, and then we bought a house, and I needed to kind of like I was like I need to get some serious cash coming in now. So I ended up actually working for Vodafone Group in Paddington and commuting from the south of France weekly. Amazing time. I met some amazing people there, and then after I think it was a period of about 18 months, I had to leave. I was a contractor; they couldn't keep me any longer. And then I think it was the telecom pretty much snapped me up on the same day that I left Vodafone. So I kind of jumped from a UK telco to a German telco, and very different color branding and styling. And then I was based out of either Bonn or Darmstadt, which is kind of like a very small town next to Frankfurt. And during that time, I'd also met one of the founders at AJ, and we coincidentally had the same agent. And actually, that's how I met Michael, because we went for like a lunch with our agent, and it was just us two who were the contractors at the time. And Michael and I had this immediate like rapport, and he ended up asking me if I would like help them out with some projects. The very early, this is like 6-month mark of like AJ&Smart. If I would go and help them in a design capacity. This is before they even changed their business model to sprints. And we worked on some pretty funky projects together, and we just stayed in touch. And I really liked the vibe of what John and Michael were creating back then. It felt like they had definitely not taken themselves too seriously, and they were really challenging kind of like the status quo and like how things were being done. So that relationship, I guess you could say, blossomed over a number of years. And I think I stayed at Telecom for about 18 months. And then AJ offered me a role again. I turned them down several times before. And it was at the same time when actually IBM had also headhunted me to go and help set up a new studio in Dubai and be the creative director of UX. And yeah, it was kind of like a real like junction. Should I go this kooky little agency in Berlin, or should I go like the big corporation enterprise thing of, this IBM giant? And actually, it's funny because when I left Qualcomm, I said to myself, I would never go back to like a corporation. Like it just for me sucked, right? So I was kind of wowed by IBM and their relationship with Apple, and it was a big selling point for me that we would, have the opportunity to work closely with them. And so of course, like IBM won through, right? And also what a great experience to kind of relocate the family again to, Dubai, where, the summers are ridiculously hot, where the moisture in your eyeballs just evaporates, and the winters are actually quite pleasant. Yeah, we ended up taking the leap and doing that. And 3 months into the IBM role, I had one of many check-ins with John and Michael, and they had just kind of tracked Jake down, Jake Knapp, who is the author of Sprint. And they had done a case study. They'd done, I think it was something like Share the Meal or something, and they wanted to kind of create this case study, and I guess they wanted him to endorse that. And I just had this conversation with John and Jake, and I said, look, he's going to really want to hear like what you guys have to say, because he's written this book. You've basically endorsing the book and endorsing his kind of processes. So he's going to want to hear you. And John was like, just come and join us, Rob. As soon as you're done with like IBM, just come and join us. And he was like, well, if it takes 1 year or 2 years, then it's fine. We'll just wait for you. And I was like, that's amazing. Like that, but that just goes to show how cool like they were. They were kind of willing to kind of take these risks and like wait for people, even as a very small agency. So that was kind of like my next path, was to kind of ride out the IBM journey, which was also a great experience. I learned also so much, not about design, but actually how I communicated design, and also really kind of getting to grips with design thinking and what enterprise design thinking and the nuances are between the two. So we packed up after a couple of years, moved to Berlin. And the joke that we have actually at our house is that we would never have moved from the south of France to Berlin. It just would never have happened. It took us to go kind of via an extreme country like Dubai with extreme heat to actually get that to work. So eventually persuaded the wife, and the kids were already up for it. And then we ended up moving to Berlin, and I did 3 years at AJ&Smart, where we were immediately kind of like thrusted into, okay, we're going to California. We're running a design sprint for Udacity. We're training Google. Washington Post need training on design thinking. On design sprints. And also, Amex in New York we were literally jumping from one to the other. And in those really early days, in the first couple of years, the team were just so hungry to work on like the next big client. And again, kudos to AJ for like pulling in like their reputation and, riding on this, and then kind of pulling in some amazing clients. And I remember we were in San Francisco. We had been running a boot camp with Jake, and we had companies like Uber and Lyft and McKinsey there. And I think we were about 5 days out from flying home, and Adidas were like, okay, can you do a sprint like next week? And we were like, okay. And like, I remember
Absolutely.
we were in this coffee shop and Michael was like, you guys are going to be jet lagged. Like, do you want to do it? And I was like, hell yeah. Like, I love trainers, like sneakers. We have to do this. And that was the energy that we were all like running on. Like, we were just like going from like company to company, and the next one, HSBC, and then Twitter wanted us to go and run sprints for them as well. And it was just like mind blowing. It's like, yeah, like we've got to do this.
And was all this coming about from word of mouth?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was at the time when, AJ&Smart were very tactical in being first, right? So they had to, managed to persuade Jake to be an ambassador of like the 2-day design sprint, which is a massive deviation from his book. And he actually fully endorsed it. And I think it was just at the time when like people just wanted change, and like agencies were kind of like really struggling to kind of secure like retaining work. And I think that was where John and Michael just saw that there was an opportunity for processizing how companies can actually innovate. And they also felt like the whole retainer based, app design was too risky for them. So this was actually they formulated this package that was actually easier for them to sell and easy. The reputation was kind of like, building upon like, okay, we've done a case study, we're promoting it, people are interested. Training obviously is a great accelerator as well for getting companies to kind of buy in as well. There's a few magic ingredients. I probably can't disclose too much, obviously, for like tactical reasons, but there was a few very tactical decisions made back then that definitely helped elevate AJ&Smart from their competitors. And, I mean, let's be honest, like all of the agencies that back in those days that were working for all of those big companies, everybody was on a poll, right? So it wasn't just exclusive to AJ, but I think it just felt like we were there first, and that was like the thing that really mattered. And
so
yeah,
you guys were training these companies in sprints.
yeah. Back in the day, early days, like we were training them as well. So like we would do the boot camps with Jake and actually run them through the process, and the training would be 2 days, which would be almost like the 4 quadrants of the first 2 days of the workshop. And it was like, that was the power of it. And like, even now, like to this day, like that's a disruptive process that these kind of Silicon Valley companies were like, we're going to get left behind if we don't do this. So like, we have to get on board. And I think, it's still happening now. I think a lot of companies are now baking their sprints in internally. There's still a requirement for them. But I know at BeTheLeap, we are very selective in like how we would, like often companies come to us, and obviously because of my reputation, they were like, can you do a sprint? Sometimes it doesn't always fit. And we have other products now that we would go, actually, we think you might need like the product audit, for example, instead of the sprint. And that's where we kind of find that we actually get a better fit for the challenge of the customer. It doesn't always have to be a design sprint. There can be other things that need to be solved. So that's kind of how I dabbled a little bit into the BeTheLeap stuff then. But yeah, that's kind of like where we position ourselves. And like, I guess after AJ, I mean, even before IBM, I knew I wanted to have my own agency. And I actually back then felt that leaving my freelance business when I was working for like, Deutsche Telekom and Vodafone, I was also working for Snapdragon as well as one of my own clients. I felt like to separate myself from my freelance work, it would help if I kind of like just like went and did something like IBM. That was kind of like my more kind of grown up rationale for joining IBM. And so, yeah, kind of meeting Michael and John and finding this AJ&Smart company was a huge spanner in my kind of like my master plan, if you wish, because I knew that I wanted to have my own agency. But when I kind of stumbled upon them, it kind of actually made me realize that, okay, if I do want to do an agency, I want to do it. I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't perfect, but it was a complete antithesis of IBM. But if I wanted to do an agency, it would be something like that, because it just felt like they got so much of it right, especially with things like culture and like people wanted to work. Like, like people wanted to not take holiday because Adidas were coming through the door, like, so tell me a company where like you get people that actually cancel their holiday to kind of pull a new client in and work for it. It's almost like unheard of. So yeah, that they were really great days and really good times, but we were all kind of like running on vapors. I remember like, people would be like, we'd have to go like, you need to take a holiday now, like you just need to have a break. And it's like people would eventually kind of like, take breaks and things like that. And even those first couple of years, we had a 4-day week. One of the other cool things that AJ did was like they gave everybody Friday off. So it's like, that's a pretty ballsy move as well, right? Because like, the senior members of the team would be like, well, we've got back-to-back sprints. We were running 1 week sprints back then. And we're like, at what point do we start prepping for the sprint that's happening on Monday? So it kind of meant that the more senior members didn't really have the 4-day week, but knowing that we could like finish and leave work at like 2 or 3 p.m. was a great way to kind of know that we were able to kind of have a longer weekend. And I think that's where we kind of like recouped a lot of our energy to just keep going and keep going. So yeah, and I guess AJ was 3 years. Michael left at the beginning of 2019. I guess if you're spiritual, people believe in this 7-year cycle. And I think AJ&Smart was going into its like 8th year, and there were lots of changes happening. And for me, I felt like that was a time for me where it's never going to be as good as it was. And to kind of maintain this was maybe like, now the onus was on me to create something to kind of keep that energy moving forwards. Yeah, I left in 2019. My first client for BeTheLeap was Blink. And then my second client was a Mexican bank, and they wanted me to go and run a design sprint for them. So yeah, it was like, okay, well, I mean, this is great, right? This is a good stuff. And then little did we know that the pandemic was going to unfold.
Right.
And actually, I took my wife to Mexico, and she had a bit more of a holiday than I did, I'll be honest. But like, we realized that we had to get home because obviously the world was going into lockdown. And then I'm thinking to myself, what a weird time to start an agency just as the world is going into this thing that no one really knows like what it is and how long it's going to last. And, like back in the early days, we were like, a couple of weeks, it'll blow over. And
little did we know.
Yeah. And I remember actually being really grateful for there was a McKinsey report of like a high, medium and low road approach of like how the pandemic was going to like, basically like last. And I went straight to the high road, which was like 5 years. And I thought to myself, do you know what? Like we need to prep for being in for the long haul here. And that's where I then started to completely remodel BeTheLeap and actually what our service offerings were. And actually that's where the product audit came from, me kind of deconstructing the sprint and actually creating something that was more orientated to design thinking and putting the customer first. And I always joke about it. And that was that, we always worked on complex problems and complex products, the nature of like my reputation and who we worked for. And it was very hard to cost some of these jobs. Like, one of them was, one of these products was like a business modeling software. And it was like, yeah, we want to make it look good. Can we do this? Can we do that? And I was like, yeah, you can do all those things. I was like, okay, how much is that going to cost? I was like, well, like it costs a lot. Like that's a big deal. So the product audit was basically created to basically put it in front of customers so that they could tell us where it was like tripping up. And then I would then be able to dissect what would be a priority or, urgency or a requirement that needed fixing immediately based on, ticking these kind of like lists for these customers.
Right.
So they kind of helped me cost it and prioritize. And then it just evolved because originally it kind of came out of the Pareto 80-20 principle of like, if we can do like 20%, but have the 80% effectiveness, then that's great for the client because it means that they have this full transparency on pricing and things like that. So I learned very early on that I had to kind of think and be like several steps ahead of like where I wanted to position us for our customers. And that was quite exciting as well. Like I never felt like during the pandemic, like, what have I done? Like, have I fucked up epically here? And I know that I know what I'm capable of. I know what I'm responsible for. And I know what risks I'm willing to take. And I know that when it's for your own good or for your own company, then it becomes a bit more real, but you're a bit more applied for it. So these are a lot of the learnings I've learned from being the founder of BeTheLeap.
Yeah. What was the appetite of companies during that time, Rob? So, were they retrenching or were they, hey, we need to do something here as well?
Yeah, good question. Really good question. So what I discovered was there were consistencies with what the requests were that came in. And it was becoming less and less about innovation as in innovation for new products. It was about, okay, we've got to survive, and assume like you've got a corporation and they've got a choice between spending a load of money on a new project, which is quite risky. And, they're assuming that in 3 or 6 months' time, the world's going to go back to normal. That's when they'll kind of so they deferred a lot of the innovation kind of things. And what we felt was, well, what I realized was that they wanted to go into this kind of fixing phase. So it's like, we've got a product, we've got a business, like something's not quite working as efficiently as we'd hoped it would. So this is where my kind of positioning us between the business model and the end customer became more and more key, because it's like, well, we have a more critical role here. And it's more than like, oh, our landing page isn't working or we're not getting the conversion that we want. It was actually about fixing products so that their existing customers could be more easily kind of immersed into like their product experiences, rather than, the founding team or like the customer services team guiding them on how they're going to use it. So, and this is this one particular business modeling software. So it's like, yeah, these guys, they needed to basically free themselves up to do more things, and actually putting more energy and focus and time into their product was the only way to kind of do that, rather than, we need a new product, let's see how we can do that. And then obviously when I'd deconstructed the sprint, it also enabled me to deconstruct how we offer our sprints as well, because what I felt like was, and it seems like really crazy now, like back in the early 2020s, like working remotely and, running a sprint remotely, not many companies had done that. We had done it at AJ&Smart. We had done like remote workshops, and we were testing like with real-time board back in those days before it became Miro. We were doing like Google, like I think Google Slides as a way of actually running like a remote like sprint session. And it's like, if you've ever tried getting people to dot vote in Google Slides, like it's mind-blowingly shit. So like, we went through all of these experiments about like what's going to work. So coincidentally, when the pandemic happened and when remote sprints were, like, we'd already got a lot of the learnings. Keep the screen time down. Like if it's a 3-day or 2-day sprint, it means nothing now, because you're breaking those sessions over a week. It could be 3 days. And actually, this is a conversation I had recently, and that is that like, I actually don't really now sell a design sprint on 2 days or 5 days or whatever it is. It's just a design sprint. And if it's a remote sprint, it will take this long. If it's an actual sprint, it will take this long. I mean, there's the same period of time, but just you move all of the kind of like the timings, it just becomes less important. And I think that's where we are with sprints now, is that like people don't really care about the process. They just want the outcome, right?
Right.
So that was kind of like those early days of where we were kind of like leading into that. And so, yeah, I guess we've now solidified, we've grown up a little bit now. I think we're in our like 5th, going into our 6th year now, which is mind blowing as well. So 5th year, because it's 2025, but it's gone really fast. We've seen a lot change from the landscape of like, the pandemic and innovation. And, I had actually a more accurate description of like the product audit. It was more like a fixing or whatever you want to call it. But if it's like, what I've realized is that, there's a whole journey that our clients go through to actually help them, it could be design thinking right at the beginning, helping them understand their customers, getting them to empathize more, actually putting their customers in these actual workshops where they can meet them. Then you've got things like the design sprint. Then you've got the product audit, depending on which direction you want to go. Then you've got the brand jam, which is actually our newest product, and it's actually incredibly popular.
Love it.
And what we did was we kind of demystified like the brand sprint, because the brand sprint for me was never long enough. Like whenever I ran the brand sprint that Jake had created, like 3 hours was just like, it was too fast. And what we found was that the customers that we were putting the brand sprint in front of, they were just like, well, we've got this far. What about this? What about, where it just left them short. And it felt like it was just a teaser for like getting started. So we kind of came up with the brand jam as a way of existing companies with existing brands. They can jam on something that complements their business, like if it's a new product, or if it's a startup that needs a brand really quickly, they can jam on it and it isn't going to cost them 100 million. Or if it's like a mid-sized company and they just, they need to evolve their brand into the new evolution, they can jam on it. So it felt like it's a way of just lifting the weight off everybody's shoulders of expectations of what rebranding would ultimately mean for them.
How long are your brand jams?
So it depends on we've got actually 3 packages on our brand jam. And the first one is like a 2-day workshop. So yeah, we took this thing that was originally like 3 to 4 hours and made it 2 days. And there's a lot of preload that we have with that. It's actually a 2-week package, but the workshop is 2 weeks. And then obviously we spend, 2 days, and then we spend a week kind of doing a handing over. And obviously that depends on what the client wants as well. Like, if they want a report, if they want more actual physical attributes kind of created, then that's what we do. And then we got varying scales of working with partnering agencies with a go-to-market strategy, and then actually with branding as well. So we're a very small company, and we actually move faster by being smaller. And what that means is that we've got exceptional partners that we work with who complement our kind of strategy piece. Like, we are not great at the go-to-market piece, or we can do it, but we know that we can't do it as well as other companies. So being situated in Berlin, we've got some amazing friendly agencies that we partner with. And this is why we're then able to work on like much larger packages for like corporations and go like proper like enterprise level as well. So, and this is actually what we did last year with a global payments platform. We ended up helping them rebrand like that platform. And then in turn, they ended up rebranding like from like the mother company. We didn't do that part, unfortunately, but they were worried about us kind of getting diluted on the product side. But it meant that they were thinking about how they were going to then start kind of rebranding everything. So yeah, really interesting kind of scenarios with like how that then complements like the strategy components that we have up front. And then we obviously have our like UX, UI execution. And then we even have like a training module as well, if that's what companies want. And depending on the size of the training, again, we might pull partners in on that. But we had this amazing venture capitalist company in California where I was actually training Harvard MBA students to kind of like run design sprints. So like these are kind of the cool things that we get asked to do. So it's pretty good.
That's brilliant. What an amazing sort of journey and progression. So how would you describe the perfect fit for a sprint?
Okay, yeah, good question. So again, I think there's normally like one ambassador. So let's assume that it's maybe like an enterprise level like customer, okay? The sponsor is normally the person who knows about sprint or is willing to kind of take punt that this is actually going to be something that they are going to like, it's going to help them disrupt with internally the processes and how their teams work, but also in the speed in which they can actually create a vision for this product as well. And then I think it has to be the challenge. Like the challenge has to be gritty enough. Like I think I mentioned it earlier, like you would never do a sprint for like, we can't find the call to action on the landing page, we're losing customers. It'd be like, okay, well then just move it up. Yeah, you don't need a sprint to that. But for example, if a company is understanding there's a shift in their customers and how they are maybe using their platform, they would just not have the time to wait a year to get something to market to then just like then test it. So with our customers, what we often find is that they've already got an inkling that something needs to happen. They've got an idea of some form of kind of product experience, but they don't quite know how to execute it. So we would go in and actually then also help them kind of understand that some of the assumptions that they had were the right ones. And then you can materialize something and then you can test it. And also if it's a new product, like that's a great way for a company to kind of sell it to their prospective customers as well, especially if it's like B2B, right? So we're also positioned in that way to have these kind of very delicate conversations and relationships with their partnering customers, and we've done this before in San Francisco, where we've been responsible for like ad tech client relationships that are worth over $1 million each, you know? So like when you're showing a new concept of a product that we know was only made like 3 days ago, and we are kind of going, hey, you know, this is the direction this company's going in. Like, you know, is it, you know, how does it feel? You know, it's like we're trying to very delicately kind of understand from them what their requirements are so that we can actually respin it and actually make them a product that they actually want. So it's there's a lot of mind games, good mind games, I would say, in a sprint, and understanding the psychology and the behavior of like the clients and the clients' customers into kind of like understanding what products are going to fit. So
you mentioned assumptions. So what I'm assuming here is that a customer will come to you and okay, there's some sort of problem as you sort of mentioned. How do you probably a couple of questions? How do you address manage when you feel that actually this is not the real problem? Plus also testing some of their assumptions, which again you might feel were actually not the big rocks that we need to sort of find evidence for. So how do you navigate that?
With a lot of tact and diplomacy, mostly. No, I mean, part of our job, right, even as a designer, is to kind of present customers with options, right, so that they can then make more informed decisions. So, of course, like, you're going to get, if it's like a startup company or even an enterprise, you know, product manager, for example, or whatever, like, they're going to have a belief that what they want is right. And part of our job is to kind of also help them understand if it is or if it isn't, right? So I've been privy to many great kind of ideas of what sprint products can be. And a little bit of me gets excited when they're really wacky ones. But the other half of me is like it's going to need a lot of moving parts to kind of get that over the line. A lot of our job is to, of course, like advise. When we run sprints, we never just facilitate. Like our team are product designers, so that's the extra bake that they get, that they don't just get facilitation, they get us actually helping them find solutions for these things. So it comes down to a lot of, probably very tactful conversations up front to kind of go, well, you know, I have to set the scenarios. Like, what if we put your idea in front of customers and they don't like it, I want to know how you're going to react to that. And of course, they'll be like, yeah, like we're open to feedback and we want to know what's the right thing to do. And it's like, good, because like that will be imperative to whether your product has success or not. And of course, like week 1 happens and then we do iteration sprints. So they come back again for week 2. And then we're able to then, with the data that we collect, persuade them that some of the decisions or assumptions that they'd made earlier were maybe not the right ones. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's them, it's their decision, right? We can only explain or present the data and the facts to a certain point. And if they're going to go beyond that, then we have to kind of go, well, you know, we respect that, but we recommend that you don't. Kind of wish them good luck. But I have to say that hasn't really happened for a very, very long time. It happened a couple of times in the early AJ&Smart days, and that's part of the reason why we actually came up with the iteration sprint, is to kind of solidify that data and kind of give them something more tangible. It actually mitigated a lot of that happening. It gave you a week to pivot, basically, if something was drastically not working. So it just meant that we were able to kind of put our money where our mouth was and kind of go, right, well, look, here's the data we got. We think you can do this. I think that answered your question, right? Was there another part of that question? Because it was
no.
Oh, yeah, there was one thing I wanted to add. So assumptions are cool. Like whenever we do a sprint, like you've got assumptions, I've got assumptions, our sponsors have got assumptions. Anyone who's an expert will have an assumption of like where this product experience can go. So when we run our sprints, we actually add a design thinking component before the sprint, which means that we are going to start actually talking to people, talking to customers, even if it's a new product, a new vertical from an industry, we would find another industry vertical that is similar to try and understand like maybe where they're having friction or where they're having pain points, things like that. So this is like, for those of you that are listening and for you, Vaughan, like you'll then start to realize this is the design thinking part. This is where opportunities and pain points, right? So all we're trying to do is identify early on where they're likely to have a pain point, which then also helps us to find a better solution in the sprint if we already know what some of their pain points are. And we then, as the expert team, we are then able to apply opportunities to those pain points through new product experiences, new features, whatever, right? So when we go into sprint, we already have a pretty good idea of what our concept sketch has to tick in order to eliminate those pain points. So this is how we go about solving for those complex problems, by actually just asking the awkward questions up front and getting a kind of like a getting like a first hand experience of like where these customers are likely to kind of like want something. So when we go into a sprint, I call them loaded assumptions, so that we have this kind of like, yeah, they're still assumptions, but we're pretty much, we're getting closer to that bullseye with regards to accuracy already, because we already know what some of those customers want. And then we also share those interviews. They could even be type form questionnaires. We try and talk to between 3 and 5 people to kind of also try and understand whether there's some consistency there as well. But yeah, that helps us to be way more accurate. And I think that's why, like, our BeTheLeap, we used to call them product sprints, but they're still design sprints, why we felt like they were way more accurate and able to hit the ground running with way more accuracy. So yeah, that's why we found a lot of the products that we actually create ended up going to market.
You've just sort of touched on something that was going to be my next questions. Where does your sort of grasp or deeper understanding around the problem the customers come in? And you've obviously just spoken to that, but I'm interested, do you do any further work to actually understand the what you're stepping into as an organization in terms of the particular sector and the culture of that organization? Because obviously those dynamics are going to sort of inform the end product, but also how you might manage things in the sprint.
Yeah, 100%. And I started doing this at AJ&Smart, and that was like, remember I said really early on when we would have the Fridays off and how are we going to prepare for a sprint? Back in those days, we would just spend 3 hours prepping for a sprint, and then they would come in, and on the Monday morning, I would be trying to work out who everybody was, what the dynamic was. Whereas now we can spend sometimes up to, not full time, but maybe up to 3 weeks before the sprint, we might be actually talking to the team that are going to be in the sprint. And that would be done over a period of time, especially when you talk about enterprise, when people have like personal time off and things like that. Just wanting to make sure that we do actually have a conversation with everybody from the client side who's going to be in that sprint room. And actually, for me, it was like, this is actually how, trade secrets coming out now, I am able to work my magic, because I think I have good empathy with people, and I can only do that once I get to know them. And that's how I manipulate people to get the best out of them, because I'm already kind of building a rapport with them. You're also, of course, looking out for like who's going to be the disruptor, who's going to be like the alpha as well. Once you start understanding like the behavior aspects of some of these, C-suite people, that, most of them are functioning psychopaths, right? In the true sense of like leadership. Obviously they're not, but there's going to be some, you have to manage these kind of like big egos sometimes, and you have to manage like, how they interact with each other. And there have been some tangy moments where it's like, where is this going? Like, I have no idea where this is going. Like, and like, I think even in back in the AJ days, we had two founding partners that nearly broke the company up during a sprint because they couldn't agree. So, being able to have these tactics to understand the dynamics and the teams, then it of course, it's like having a couple of aces up your sleeve to help you then be able to navigate that. There was an amazing sprint. I've given this as a kind of an example many times. I'm not going to mention names, but during the sprint, one of the team had questioned the 2 concepts that had been chosen and felt that the storyboard concept didn't encapsulate the reasons why those concepts were chosen. This is like, bearing in mind, we're storyboarding. You've got the 15-minute round, and you've got 2 45 minutes. This is about 8 minutes toward the end of completion, right? So this huge spanner was thrown up into the air, and I'm thinking like, oh my God, like, what is going on? Like, is this just happening? And I just thought to myself, well, that if I kind of show fear, they're going to kind of like literally we're going to lose control of this. And I just said to the person who had raised it, and I went, that's a really good question. And then she kind of felt like she'd undermined like the CEO. And I just said, then I said, look, everybody take a step back, like, relax. Like, you are all in this room for this reason. Like, if you're here because your brain and your mind and your expertise are trying to lend itself into collaboration and trying to move forward. And we're doing this at an accelerated pressure cooker kind of like pace as well. But I just said, and what I did, I completely winged it at the time. And I just went, like, thanks for being so honest. Like, because that's a really brave thing to do. But also, then I went, do you think you're the only person that's questioned that at this point in the storyboarding before? And then everybody went, oh, okay, cool. Well, if it happens all the time, that's great. We've done the job. We've raised the right questions. Of course, none of it had happened before. I'm just trying to like de-escalate like this thing that's going on. And through literally 2 very quick decisions, they were able to rectify it. And then we moved on. But I just thinking to myself is like, and I think I use it when I'm training, because I think if there's a new facilitator and they need to know how to handle certain situations, I just say to them, I was like, if you look like you're shocked and this is the first time that you're about to experience this, they will literally ride you until you're crying. Like, literally they will lose faith in your ability to lead the room. You've got to keep this kind of like facade of like you're in control. And that's a great question. And, and it gives them a huge amount. It gives them almost like a safety barrier of comfort to then think about how they're going to move out of it. So yeah, there's always the dynamic side of things. And I always still feel awkward even now, even if there's a couple of people that I haven't been able to speak to and they're coming into the sprint, because like there's a fine balance of setting everybody up. And, even as part of our onboarding, we will walk them through the sprint and show them a concept sketch so that they know what to expect. Okay. And, like if someone isn't privy to that, they're going to already go into that room guarded, like, what are we doing today? Like, I don't want to be made to look stupid. Like, like what's going on? Whereas part of our onboarding is actually it's actually more for us to kind of tell them what's going to happen than actually for us to understand what's going on. I love it. I love the psychology and the behavior of everything to do with the participants in a sprint. It's an amazing kind of when you come out of day 1 and then you go into day 2 and then you come out of day 2 as well. It's like, holy shit, like it's done it again. Like it's like it works every time. That's a true homage to like Jake's genius as well.
What do you see as maybe a next evolution, if there is, of design sprints? Like, because I think it started out as a 5-day, and then I think we're down to sort of largely 4 days for a traditional sort of sprint. And you've really, by the sound of it, sort of picked the best components for maximum sort of results, and also minimizing the time requirements for some of the participants. So some of the executives perhaps don't need to be there for the whole 4 days. So what do you think perhaps might be for the future of sprints and therefore the ongoing demand for sprints?
Interesting. Actually, do you know what? I don't think I have the answer for that, because like even today, I think Jake and Jay-Z, they had announced the foundation sprint as part of like the next evolution of the design sprint. So I'm very curious to kind of know what that is. But all I know is that between my time at AJ&Smart and also the sprints that we've run for BeTheLeap, like we have continually kind of evolved them, but we also know which bits you shouldn't meddle with. So like things like, the research up front, the empathy interviews, and, kind of like whether that's through experts or customers, and kind of really getting to know the customers, and even going into the sprint and preloading things like the map. Like these are all tactics that have been designed to kind of speed up and take the weight and stress out of the sprint. So like from my perspective, the sprint, that's it now. Like, so I'm really curious to know what the foundation sprint is and whether its objective is actually something quite different. There's been a lot of conversation around like AI sprints over the last few years. And, to be brutally honest, I think it's a fad. I think people are just trying to jump on like the AI like ship, and to be current, and to be, and to put that into terms that anyone listening will understand. We ran a sprint for that venture capitalist in California in 2020 for an AI tool. Okay. So we were already doing it back in 2020. And what we didn't do is create a whole new AI sprint just for it. You're able to apply the same tactics to kind of get like the same outcomes. And like back in those days, there weren't like AI experts. Like it was like, okay, we need to try and really understand what automation is. And, we were swatting up as much as we could on what AI could be and where we wanted it to be. And actually that was, again, coincidentally, another business modeling software. And like that was crazy, the outcomes of like that product experience. But AI now, yeah, you could use Midjourney, for example, or something to create the screens. Like, is it going to be accurate? No. Why would you do it? So you would use it to help you create some of the screen flows, but you're not going to go, oh, okay, well, this is an AI sprint. We'll just let AI do the whole outcome. Like that, you just wouldn't do that. But
Sorry, Karen.
Yeah, but you might, for example, get now like an actual AI or ChatGPT expert to be in the room when you're concepting on what potential AI solutions should be there. But we also try and steer the conversation around, like, don't think of AI being a solution to everything. It's like, what I've said recently a lot is that, like, if you're saying that you've got AI in your platform, like, so what? So's everybody else now. Like, it's just like another kind of like value proposition, right?
Absolutely.
You should be kind of embedding it in a way that people don't realize that they're getting a great customer experience. And we've already embedded, okay, just to show how easy it is, with I'm a co-founder to an app that's come out of California called Takes, and it's like a sports and social media platform. We embedded ChatGPT within 3 days of it being launched we called it commish, so it kind of give you sports stats and things like that. But it was a way in which it would kind of fill the need to give people, like, how you get like there's always a mate in the bar who, like Stato, who knows when, two teams played in 86 and what their score was.
Sure.
Well, this is how we embedded ChatGPT to be like the Stato or the commish, so that
okay.
This then goes back to another parallel that I had with IBM, and that was like when it was my last month at IBM, and I think we were talking to like Etihad or something, and we had the whole IBM team. There were strategists from the US over, like an amazing amount of brains went around this table to find a solution for this whole like end-to-end customer experience. And when we were strategizing, they were kind of running these kind of playbacks back with the team and like how they were going to pitch, and they went all into like yeah, Watson's going to be doing this and this is going to be doing that, and they literally just went through the whole like funk spec of like all of the tools that would enable them to do stuff. And at the end of it, I was like, guys, like, you've killed it. Like, and they were like, oh, yeah, great. No, I don't know. I went, no, you've killed it. Like, it's dead in the water. I was like, where's the mystery? Where's the intrigue? Like, you haven't sold the story of like, you haven't focused on the customer. Like, this person is going to start by, booking their ticket online. They might have a car come and pick them up, but certainly when they sit in their seat, like they could have their name on the seat in front on the TV. And I know that airlines are starting to do this now, but like back in like 2015, like that was not really heard of. But it was like, you want to leave them with how are they doing that, and have them ask the questions. Well, how does that Wi-Fi beacon talk to like their biometric data in their passport or something? And then you can go, oh, well, we've got this piece of software that does that, or we've got this that does this. But they just went on the hard sell of like the almost like the back end, and not actually what the customer experience was. And that was kind of like how that kind of parallel came around.
Rob, just on the AI piece, like I'm interested, like obviously, that's a key sort of talking point and a solution for all the problems from a customer's point of view. But how, if at all, are you incorporating AI in your business in terms of the sprint or anything like that? Are you working with it for creativity or?
We actually start using AI for everything, and it could come down to you could even say Grammarly, right, is AI if it's helping you write better. We're using it a lot in our comps, so we're using Midjourney a lot. We're also using whatever I can't remember what the Google one is, but we're actually using a mixture of all of them for different outcomes. But we're finding it also copy as well. Like, we are using ChatGPT, but we don't really like it. But for example, if you're creating a prototype, it's a great way to get started. And what we often find is we then throw it back to the customer and then they will actually kind of spin on it. But it's a great way to kind of give them all of the kind of foundational requirements for what it should be. But where we find, for example, ChatGPT and copy, certainly when it comes to like branding as well, is that it doesn't really understand tonality yet. Like it doesn't really understand, like with one of our customers, we had B2B and B2C, like it didn't really understand the continuity of what single tone of voice would be, but would be able to differentiate between B2B and B2C. But that's where you would have a copywriter would come and then be able to know exactly how to do that, and then give you 3 different concepts of how that tone of voice could be as well. So we are using it, and we're kind of intrigued to kind of see where it goes. But there's nothing that we would say is part of our sprint is like, that's only done by AI, or that's only done by this, or only done by that. It still needs brains to understand where AI is actually helping you, and then knowing how you can then kind of, accelerate from that, rather than just, I know what happens. People put stuff into ChatGPT and go, oh, great, it's done it for me, we're going to use it. That will also look the same for everybody else. And also, we've also understood that if you put the same prompts in, you get different responses as well. So like,
Absolutely.
it's like, it's just not quite right there at the moment, but I'm super excited to see where it's going to go. And I think this kind of came back to that very early conversation of like when Max came out, like, people said back in those early days, it's like, well, like we're not going to have jobs, the Mac's going to take over for us. And these are all these traditional like markup artists that were designers. And it's like, no, it's solely reliant on the person doing the inputting to know what is right and what's going to be amazing. And of course, like, I think it will help with productionizing kind of like processes and things like that. Of course it will. But if you're dialed into how you can use it, then you will still be relevant, because it's like, if you just sit back and assume it's going to do everything for you, you'll get left behind.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say there. I mean, there's been some recent studies come out of MIT, I think it is. But anyway, in a nutshell, what they found is people are passing over the thinking. So, that in itself means that you're not going to surface all of the sort of interesting or novel pieces which you need for innovation and to differentiate yourself and that sort of thing. And I'm just really on that journey of myself of dabbling into AI, and I'm largely just using it as a blank page sort of prompter starter, just to get something going. A little bit for copywriting that, but again, I find I need to put my voice, my knowledge, my tacit knowledge on there, because obviously it can't capture what's in the expert's head. It's it's pulling from the internet and that sort of thing. So but it will be interesting to see where it goes in the future.
I think we're also starting to look into it for like more like our operational side of like the business as well. So I think there's definitely things that can be done, but like this is kind of like, and actually for me, this is a really good topic, because like we run BeTheLeap with such a personalized and attentive way. And of course, like that's probably like most people go, oh, that's not scalable. It's like, we don't necessarily want to scale for the sake of it. Like we are very good at what we do, and we service clients in a particular need, with a particular need in a certain way. And when we bring in things like AI and automation, I want to make sure that it mirrors exactly like how like we would do things normally, but it just means that we don't have to kind of like be, writing a generic email. So writing an email response, like it will know kind of roughly what we want to do, or how we want to talk to a customer, or, booking or something, like, so these are the things that we're looking into, but we're pretty sure it's going to help us. And like, we also don't want to be left behind. I think if we don't do that, then of course, like we're in danger of like definitely not being able to scale. So this is something that we're taking very seriously as well.
Absolutely. Rob, before we sort of kicked off the recording, we sort of started having a bit of conversation around some of the ways that you go about testing. And I was really interested in, you started to talk about how you have experienced or utilized role plays previously, and perhaps you could share a bit about that example in terms of a situation that you utilized role plays in the sprint.
Actually, I remember now, there were 2 situations. One was actually for a sprint that I ran for McKinsey in New York. And that was the first time, it came about. And it was a very complex like software that aggregated, I can't say who it was or what it was for, but it was like a software that aggregated data. And this role playing was kind of introduced as a way of kind of understanding like the relationships between all the parties involved. And it was brave because obviously you're reliant on these people that have the knowledge of like how these interactions would go, and then they're trying to like replicate that for a room of people that have no idea really what's going on. So it was great. I would say there was a caveat. Like I would say I would be worried if we did a sprint and 12 people in the room went, oh, I'm going to role play my lightning demo, because I think it is nice to have something a bit more tangible. So I think if you have 1 out of 12 that's role play, and it kind of really helps you get into the head of like the mind of like the customer and, what they're kind of experiencing. I think it's a really, really fun way to kind of share experiences. Whereas typically a lightning demo, you're going to show an app and you're going to walk people through it. And you might even, for those that have done remote sprints, this is easier because then you can actually get the screen grabs of all of the flows and have that as a reference point. Whereas in a real sprint, you're writing the description down on Post-it notes and sketching some. Equally, it's nice, but there's sort of same but different experiences. Whereas the role play, you cannot really capture that. You're watching and learning, unless someone's taking notes or drawing stickmen or whatever, then that's the only way that you can really kind of capture it. So I would say it is a bit risky, and I would say you have nothing to lose if someone wants to kind of reinforce a belief or a demonstration through that, and then just enjoy it, but like maybe just don't take it too seriously.
In those 1 or 2 sort of examples, what do you think that there was anything sort of unique sort of insight or anything interesting that came out of that using the role play that perhaps you wouldn't have found in the traditional way?
Coincidentally, it was both around a customer experience through that nature of that business. So it meant that you were really able to understand more succinctly like how their customers were feeling. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah. And so if you were going to use that again to leverage that empathy, like what sort of tips would you perhaps recommend people?
I would say definitely have people to like write Post-it notes and kind of like almost like try and capture what's going on. So that then when you go around the room and then when you are doing your concept sketch, you have something that is tangible that you can relate back to that memory. Because obviously during a sprint, like our brains are filled with so much information so quickly. So sometimes these things can be like literally thrown in and then kicked out. I mean, even with lightning demos, like how often have you done a sprint and gone, what were all the lightning demos again? I can't remember. Yeah. It's like a lot of, there's a lot of sharing. And I think your brain is immediately like, you're kind of going to remember the things that are more, either if you've got a train of thought and a belief of a sprint product going in a certain direction, the lightning demos that kind of like reinforce that, they're the ones that you're going to remember.
Brilliant. Rob, I'd love just to dive in, perhaps as we're sort of finishing off our chat today. You mentioned way back at the start of our session today around there's a difference for enterprise design thinking.
Yeah.
So could you maybe just share a bit about that? What's the difference between perhaps on small, medium business? Okay.
I'm joking. For those of you that don't have a visual on this, I'm just laughing at a joke we did earlier. But it's the difference is, and I think I can only, so there were 2, I'm going to try and think about how I answer this. My first exposure to design thinking was with IDEO, and it was around the 2000 and early 2000, maybe 2001 or 2 or something. And for me, it was like, that is actually insane, like as in insanely good, right? To quote Mr. Steve Jobs. It blew my mind with regards to, there were people that would just be paid to observe customers, like, getting on a train, if it's like a new train carriage design, or if there was, it was so cool. And it was the first time I'd really understanding what users are, what they want. And actually we did this, we were there for like a week. We did like a whole week course or something. I don't even talk about it. I don't even mention it. It's not even on my LinkedIn profile, but it was such a great experience. And we ended up, part of our training was that we ended up going to like, I don't know, 7 different people's houses, and we were interviewing them or watching them. I can't even remember what they were working on or what they were doing. And we were literally just observing them And we came away like, I mean, obviously, like you go to the first one, I was like, who's this guy's like house? Like what, like, is this a bit weird? Like, I don't know. And, two or three of us go in with like clipboards and we sit in the lounge and, they might make a cup of tea and then we'll like observe them, doing something. It could be something like, I don't know, using a mop or like, I don't know, whatever. Right. And then we go back and then we take all our findings and then really distill like that. And then I think I remember very vividly that one of our workshops, we had like these, felt ties, fabric, silver paper, like, and you make an actual physical prototype rather than like a digital prototype. So for me, it was like, this is cool. Like, this is now like, this is actually enabling me to think differently, like how I design like these kind of interfaces. So then when we go to IBM and, we kickstart IBM with like, okay, draw a vase. And like people, that I'll draw it now for you. Like you get these people that are Sharpie, square Post-it note, and they'll do, I haven't got a Sharpie. Oh yeah, there's a Sharpie. Always got a Sharpie. They'll draw something like, I don't know, like, well, that's a vase thing. Maybe it's got a base on it and it's got some flowers. Like they'll draw like something like that, right? And then you'll hit them up with, okay, now draw an experience where you can draw something that enables you to experience flowers in a way that you haven't done before. People are then going, well, that's a vase, right? And then like some clever ass will be like, we'll draw something like, I did this once upon a time. I projected like some flowers on a wall and, like you have this thing, like imagine it's like in your lounge and you can project things onto like whatever, right? So then you go around and like that's when you go, okay, right, that's now like we're just getting you to think a little bit differently. And then the other example that I always give is like, and I actually have this in many of my presentations that I do now for like design thinking, and it's like normally to students as well, it's quite interesting. You'll be like, okay, we're going to look at the experience of coffee. And I want you to tell me what a user experience is for coffee. So the first picture I show them is like a amazing coffee machine. It's got like the trap and like the grinder, and then it's got all these things kind of like labeling them. And I'm like, is this a user experience? And they'll be like, yeah, like, because it's amazing coffee and it's like you can get really into it. It's like, no, it's not. Then the next slide I'll show them will be like a really modern version where it's got like a digital like panel and a really beautifully designed coffee machine with like a wooden handle. But like, okay, is this a user experience? Like, they've obviously thought about the handle. People are going to touch it. They want to have a better connection with the coffee machine. It's wood. And you've got this amazing like digital UI and you've got stats and the graphs of like how the pressure is. And they'll be like, yeah, like that's, of course it is. That's a user experience. And then obviously it's not, right? The third one is you have this picture of this woman. She's got this cup of coffee. Imagine she's got a cup like this and she's kind of going like this. And it's like, she's wrapped up warm. She's feeling the warmth of the coffee through her cup. She's literally waited for this moment, probably since she finished the last cup of coffee from the previous day. And I know that's because that's how I feel. And you literally look forward, you cherish this moment and you're like, nothing else matters. You've got the sun on your face and you're outside and you're literally taking a sip of coffee. That's the user experience, right? Because it's like, and then suddenly it all becomes a bit clearer with regards to, it's about empathy. It's about connecting with the customer. It's about knowing how they feel, what they want, what they don't want. So when we applied that through design thinking, those tactics at IBM, obviously it's done on a much more enterprise level. So obviously there's money involved, right? So if they're spending 5 million on an app, they're going to obviously want to connect with their customers a bit more. The design thinking workshop is a way to connect them to do that upfront. But the actual output is actually really interesting. We had some really complex parts, things like hill statements, which would be almost like a much more complicated way of kind of producing the problem statement. You wouldn't do like a concept sketch. You would do storyboard where it's almost like you would actually create, instead of Crazy 8, you would create a 6-panel screen on like an A4 piece of paper, and then people would write their concept on that. And that would be kind of like one of the outputs. There would be many different outputs, so like depending on what was required from the customer.
Sure.
But my biggest observation was when I was at IBM was that we'd done this amazing 2-day design thinking workshop, but there actually wasn't really anything tangible that came out of it. We would always have to create something that would communicate to the customer like why they'd invested this money into this workshop. And for example, one of them could be like a video, like we did a stop animation video of like this concept working, and it was all of the kind of the outcomes that people came up with, and we put it all into like this app as like a hand-drawn like stop animation like video. But like it kind of for me felt like that's where also we now tactically kind of change our design thinking so that it does become much more tangible. Like these are like the sprint learnings that we have, right? So it means that you actually have this this more tangible output for like having this kind of time with their customers. And that I could probably do a whole session on this in itself. It's very hard to kind of like skirt around it very briefly, but that's the biggest issue. And I think when we were working with Apple as well, their enterprise solutions were very limited. They were very, very they're very reluctant to actually customize anything for like the customers that we would have in the region. So it meant really that they had enterprise solutions, but it was like you have them our way, not your way. And that appealed, don't get me wrong, like that appealed to some customers because it meant that they didn't have to think about anything, but they knew it was going to work. So yeah, that the IBM enterprise design thinking is a great way to get people thinking about products in a completely different way, and to get them on board to come up with like new ideas and be open to those ideas as well. And to just get them to kind of really think about the end customer. So I would say they were the noticeable kind of differences, but probably there's a lot of parallels there with normal design thinking as well.
Look, I love that, and it's probably a really fitting way to sort of round up our sort of conversation today. But having deep empathy for customers, and then actually making tangible things so they can actually experience and connect with that product. And so for me, that's two very important pieces of the work that we do in our design thinking and that sort of thing. But Rob, I've thoroughly enjoyed hearing your journey of a product designer, your background, but also the struggles and triumphs that you're having or have had with BeTheLeap, and just some of your deep insight around design thinking, and obviously the design sprint sort of process. So thank you very much for making time, and I'm really looking forward. Hope we can do this again in the near future.
Anytime. I was hoping that you would kind of have more. It was going off on one, so hopefully it wasn't too monotonous for you as well.
This has been an awesome conversation, my friend. So thank you, Rob.
No worries.
And if you're looking to reach out and connect with Rob, you can find him on Instagram, where you can connect on his personal account and also the BeTheLeap account. Rob is frequently on LinkedIn under his personal account, Rob Hamblen, and also BeTheLeap at BeTheLeap.com.